Welcome back to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are continuing the tier list series. Now, if you didn't see last episode, go ahead and check it out. There should be something in the top right of the screen. 2 weeks ago, we did the SEC head coach tier list, as you see it here right now. For this tier list, we are taking everything into account before today. We do not take potential into account. So, where I might think Josh Heupel can be a great head coach, I don't think he has been on that tier yet. I think he can get there, honestly, but for now, he is just in the good tier. For the tiers, we have elite, which is the best of the best. Great, which is just a notch below. Good, a step below great. Achieve some level of success in their career, but not enough to be considered great. Like not making the playoffs, not winning a conference championship, something like that. Average. You haven't really done much, or you might have been good a few years ago and kind of fallen off a little bit. Poor, kind of like average, but you've fallen off a lot more. Hot seat, you're on the verge of getting fired. You really haven't done a great job. And brand new, surprisingly, you're brand new. Now, last episode, I did get a comment. I left off a coach. That is my bad. So first off, in this episode of Tier List Series, we're not starting off with a Big Ten head coach, even though that is the episode. We're starting off with Hugh Freeze of Auburn. I did forget Hugh Freeze. Auburn fans, please don't be mad at me. For a summary on Hugh Freeze, he started at Arkansas State. He was there for 1 year in 2011. Jumped to Ole Miss in 2012, and he was there until 2016. Absolutely nothing controversial happened there. And then he went to Liberty in 2019 and was there through 2022. Now he's at Auburn. Started there last year. Overall, he's gone 89-50 in his career. At Arkansas State, he was 10-3, 8-0 in the conference. Ole Miss, he went 39-22 in his years there, 19-21 in the conference. Liberty, he went 34-15, and they weren't in a conference until 2023, so they did not have a conference record, obviously. And at Auburn last year, he went 6-7 and 3-5 in the SEC. In bowl games, he went 6-3, and he is a one-time Sun Belt champion. For recruiting at Arkansas State, he averaged the 114th high school class. At Ole Miss, he averaged the 15th high school class, a big jump there, almost 100 total points. That's what happens when you move to the SEC, I guess. Liberty, 107th high school class with the 65th ranked transfer class. And at Auburn last year and this year, he's averaged the 14th ranked high school class and the 16th ranked transfer class. Overall, we're going to go with good for Hugh Freeze. Hasn't experienced the success as maybe a Kiffin or a Sarkisian, but he has been good overall. And that'll be our first example of a head coach. That's how it's going to go for this episode. We're going to take into account their overall record at every school they've been, their bowl record, their awards and championships, and recruiting in order to get a read on what tier I think the coaches belong in. So without further ado, here is the Big Ten head coach tier list. For our first Big Ten head coach, it's going to be Bret Bielema of Illinois. In his career, he started at Wisconsin in 2006 and was there until 2012. And then he moved to Arkansas in 2013 and was there until 2017. And he was hired at Illinois in 2021, where he remains now. His overall record, 115-77. A bulk of those wins came at Wisconsin, his first stop. He went 68-24 there with a 37-19 conference record. At Arkansas, he went 29-34 with an 11-29 conference record. And at Illinois so far, he's gone 18-19 with a 12-15 conference record, just below 500. For bowls, he's 4-6. And for awards and championships, he's a 3-time Big Ten champion in 2010, 2011, and 2012. And he's a 1-time Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2006. At Wisconsin, he averaged the 42nd ranked high school class. Arkansas, he averaged the 25th ranked high school class. And at Illinois, he's averaged the 58th ranked high school class, with the 64th ranked transfer class on average. Now, the problem with Bielema is his style has just really not worked in recent years. Like I said, he had a bulk of those wins at Wisconsin in his early years when his style of offense and defense was very, very optimal. And Bielema seems like the kind of guy that the game's kind of passed by. No disrespect, Illinois would be a hard school to turn around. They haven't been historically good, and for what he's done there, it hasn't been that awful. But it just seems like he's always playing catch up wherever he's at in recent years. He just wasn't very good, very average to below average at Arkansas, and he's been the same at Illinois. And on top of that, he's just not a great recruiter. 58th ranked high school class on average at Illinois, with the 64th ranked transfer class, like I said. Just not very good. It's not going to turn into meaningful wins. And I can't imagine Illinois gets to a higher level than what they are now, maybe a 5, 6, 7 win team max every year, especially in the new Big Ten. So for that, unfortunately, Bret Bielema was our first poor head coach. Just hasn't been what I assume the Illini thought he would be. Just really overall hasn't worked out great there. Even though last year they weren't terrible, it just feels like he's just not in it anymore. His style of play just hasn't been able to translate recently, but it will be interesting to see if he can turn Illinois around, maybe get to a 7, 8, 9 win season. I doubt it, but either way, that is head coach Bret Bielema. Up next, we have a new hire. It's Curt Cignetti of Indiana. Now, in Cignetti's career at the FBS level, he's been at James Madison from 2019 up until 2023 last year, and he was hired at Indiana in 2024. Now, James Madison didn't join the FBS until 2022, so we aren't taking account his record until then. Since 2022, he's gone 19-4 with a 13-3 conference record, and he's gone 0-0 in bowl games. As for awards and championships, he's a one-time Sun Belt Coach of the Year. That was last year at James Madison. And for recruiting, he's averaged the 157th ranked high school class at James Madison with the 111th transfer class. And at Indiana this year, he's had the 51st ranked high school class with the 30th ranked transfer class. Now, Indiana, like Illinois, is a very hard school to kind of turn around, turn into a consistent winner. We'll have to wait and see on that. Obviously, he has no experience at the Big Ten level. This will be his first year up and coming. And it will be interesting to track his progress there. I personally believe he has the potential to do great things at Indiana. For Indiana standards, that high school class isn't awful. I think if you're Cignetti, you try to establish Indiana as a transfer school. And he's done that decently. They have the 30th ranked transfer class this year. But you might be able to chalk that up to some of the James Madison recruits transferring from JMU to Indiana. And as for what he's done, he's been a great coach at James Madison, been able to take them to new heights, I guess, their only heights, considering they just joined the FBS level. But they have been really good the past few years since they joined that Sun Belt Conference. And for that, I don't think he's done enough to quite be a good head coach yet, so he's going to be average. Obviously, he has a lot of potential, but we aren't taking that into account here. In order for me to feel confident giving him a good or a great tier, he has to be consistently good in recruiting and be able to show that he can win games. And he just hasn't had the FBS experience for me to feel confident in that. So for that, he's our first average head coach. Up next, we have Oregon head coach Dan Lanning. Now, Oregon is, of course, a new team to the Big Ten. Dan Lanning was hired at Oregon in 2022. He was a coordinator at Georgia before that, and he's still at Oregon now. His record in his few years at Oregon is 22-5 with a 15-4 conference record. An overall great start to his career, and in bowl games he's 2-0, so he's undefeated. For awards and championships, he doesn't have any, but he's still relatively new, so that's not surprising. He's built a really fundamentally solid Oregon team. They've been really balanced the past couple years. Their offense and defense have really complemented each other well. And at Oregon in years past before Lanning got there, that's really what Oregon struggled to cultivate, is that great defense that would have complemented that offense. The offenses are usually really good there. But with Lanning's background in defensive coaching, he's come in there and really turned it around. And a lot of people are skeptical on the Pac-12 teams that are joining the Big Ten, like Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. I guess those are all of them. But I feel like of all of them, Lanning has Oregon in the best spot for immediate success in the Big Ten just because of how balanced they are. The Big Ten really prides itself with those great defenses. It'll be interesting to see how those former Pac-12 teams adjust. Now at Oregon, Lanning has averaged the 8th ranked high school class with the 11th ranked transfer class. Great numbers there. And with that, Dan Lanning is going to be our first great head coach. Now that might be a little controversial. Lanning is one of those guys who you could argue for a tweener tier in between good and great, but I think he's pretty solid. I don't think it's too controversial to put him in the great tier. It is still relatively early in his head coaching career, but for what he's done, I mean, 22-5 in 2 years is remarkable. 2-0 in bowl games. great recruiting, all around just a great head coach, and that's why he's in the great tier. Up next, we have David Braun of Northwestern. Now, in his career, he started at Northwestern last year, even though he was there before that. Before then, he was just a coordinator, and of course, the Pat Fitzgerald controversy happened, and he was hired as the interim guy. Wasn't really expected to make any waves in the Big Ten at Northwestern, just kind of a filler guy on short-term notice, because Fitzgerald was fired right before the season, if you remember. Despite that, he went 8-5 with an above 500 conference record at 5-4, and he won their bowl game. Just a great overall year for Braun, and he got hired full time, so congrats to him. He was the Big Ten Coach of the Year last year, and for recruiting, he's averaged the 64th ranked high school class this year and the 93rd ranked transfer class. Now, don't get me wrong, he had a great year last year for the circumstances. Northwestern not usually a great school, and he was able to keep them afloat, and not only do that, but help them excel last year. He's still a very new head coach, and the recruiting numbers aren't really there for me to be able to put him in the good category. So for right now, he's going to be in the average, although I think he can do a lot more at Northwestern. He's a great culture fit there. Of course, he's been there for a while, so he knows the players, he knows the system, he knows the upper management there at Northwestern. He's very familiar, and it will be interesting to see what he can do at Northwestern in the new Big Ten in 2024. Up next, we have Deshaun Foster of UCLA. We're going to keep this short and sweet. He was hired at UCLA this year, 2024, after Chip Kelly chose to step down as head coach. Now, of course, he's brand new, so he doesn't have any record, doesn't have any bowl wins, no awards, nothing like that. This year, he's had the 90th ranked high school class and the 42nd ranked transfer class. Not great, but I mean, for a transition head coach who has literally no experience, what more can you expect? It's going to be hard to bring in high school guys if they don't really know what to expect. And Deshaun Foster is our first brand new tier head coach. Up next, we have an interesting guy, in my opinion. It's Greg Schiano of Rutgers. In his career, he started at Rutgers in 2001, coached there until 2011, took a hiatus, went to the NFL, did some other stuff, and returned in 2020 to Rutgers, where he remains now. His overall record is 87-95 with a 34-56 conference record, and he's 6-2 in bowl games. Now, for awards and championships, he is a Big East Coach of the Year in 06. Rest in peace, the Big East. That's where Rutgers was before the Big Ten. And for recruiting, he's averaged the 44th ranked high school class and the 45th ranked transfer class in his time at Rutgers. Now, why is this interesting to me? Because those numbers aren't very good. In the history of Rutgers football, they've only ever really been good apart from maybe sometime in like the 60s or 70s when Greg Schiano is their head coach. I mean, other than that, they just haven't been a good school. And for some reason, whenever Greg Schiano is there, he's able to elevate them to a level that is above just straight up bad. Now, I still wouldn't consider them good or even average. They're usually a bit below average to average. It feels like their ceiling is an average 500 football team. And with that, I don't feel comfortable putting Greg Schiano anywhere above poor. You can make a case for average just because Rutgers is not really a football school. They're not really focused on that. And he's been able to elevate them to a somewhat respectable level. But when you put everything together, in recent years, they just haven't been that great. The recruiting numbers aren't great. I feel like it makes sense to have him in the poor category. He's not terrible, so he's not hot seat. And I don't think he gets the benefit of the doubt of a Cignetti or a David Braun, who are still new. So for that, he is our second poor tier head coach. Up next, we have another controversial guy. It's James Franklin of Penn State. Now, why is he controversial? Because a lot of people don't think he's that good. He hasn't really been able to win the big one yet. Hasn't really gotten over the Michigan or Ohio State hump yet. But we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves there. He started his career at Vanderbilt in 2011, and he stayed there until 2013 when he was hired at Penn State in 2014, where he remains now. Now, his overall record is 112-54, really good for active head coaches. At Vanderbilt, he went 24-15 with an 11-13 conference record. And funnily enough, he's responsible for 50% of Vanderbilt's bowl wins ever. Vanderbilt, I believe, has 4 bowl wins in its school history, and they got 2 of those under James Franklin in that 4-year period. So he was able to do there what seemingly no one else has been able to replicate. He's been able to turn them into a somewhat respectable program. And at Penn State, he's gone 88-39 with a 56-32 conference record. And he's perfectly even in bowl games at 6-6. For awards and championships, he's a one-time Big Ten champion in 2016. And for recruiting, he averaged the 40th ranked high school class at Vanderbilt and the 15th ranked high school class with the 49th ranked transfer class at Penn State. Those are really good numbers there for recruiting, especially at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's not really used to top 50 recruiting classes. So for him to break in there, it just shows the impact he really had at Vanderbilt. But I'm more focused on recent stats. I mean, like I said, he hasn't been able to reach that upper echelon at Penn State just yet. I believe he can still. I'm not one of the hardcore doubters of James Franklin. And with everything else, I mean, 88 and 39 overall, 56 and 32, well above 500 in the conference record. I feel very comfortable putting James Franklin as our second great head coach. Now, you can argue how much of an impact that inability to get the big win is. But personally, I think that is what separates James Franklin as great. He's a step above good because he is a consistent winner, great recruiter, and has proved he can get to that level. But he has not quite gotten there yet, which is what makes him not elite, just a step below. So he is our second great Big Ten head coach. Up next, we got another new school. It's Jedd Fisch at Washington. Now, for those who have been living under rocks, Kalen DeBoer, of course, left Washington after last year, after making the national championship, and he went to Alabama after Nick Saban retired. And what Washington did is they poached Arizona head coach Jedd Fisch. He was at Arizona from 2021 to 2023, and he was hired this offseason, so he does not have any experience at Washington yet, obviously. And he actually served as the interim head coach at UCLA in 2017 also for 2 games there, but I'm not really factoring that in too much. Overall at Arizona, he's gone 16 and 21 with an 11 and 16 conference record. Now that doesn't sound too impressive, but when you think back to how bad Arizona was just a few short years ago, the lack of high-end win production makes a lot of sense. They were very bad in his first couple of years, and he turned them around. This past year, they were a 10-win football team, and that is just amazing. Quite an amazing job that Fisch did there at Arizona. But now he's at Washington in the Big Ten, so we will have to see how he adjusts. Arizona was, of course, a Pac-12 school, now a Big 12 school. And for awards and championships, he has none. He's still relatively new. Started in 2021, technically started in 2017 as the interim, but who's counting? At Arizona, he averaged the 46th ranked high school class with the 35th ranked transfer class, and at his 1 year at Washington, I guess not full year, but in his first offseason at Washington, he's averaged the 47th ranked high school class with the 10th ranked transfer class. Very good for a new head coach to get those transfers in, and their top 10, which is going to prove crucial, I think, for this upcoming season. Now, Washington is a very curious case. They lose Michael Penix, they lose Rome Odunze, as well as their head coach. But I think Jedd Fisch has the capability of bringing them back. We'll just have to wait and see on how he's able to adjust to the Big Ten this upcoming year. And it feels a little cheap. I could see somebody making the argument that Jedd Fisch is a good tier head coach. I just don't think he has quite enough experience at this level to really solidify him as a good tier head coach. So he is our third average head coach. If he can improve those recruiting rankings and keep Washington in the mix for the Big Ten, he'll easily be a good or even great tier head coach. And at Arizona, he did great things, but he really only had 1 year of meaningful success there, even though it is Arizona, and 1 year of meaningful success there is very, very impressive. But either way, he is our third ranked average head coach. Now, up next, we have another former Pac-12 head coach. It is none other than the most basic name of all time, Jonathan Smith of Michigan State. Now, Smith started his career at Oregon State in 2018, and he was there up until this past season. Similarly to Fisch, he started off taking over a very bad Oregon State program and turned them around into a consistent winner. Overall there, he went 34-35 with a 23-29 conference record. Doesn't look that impressive, but when you consider the circumstances, Oregon State was a very, very mediocre program when he took that over in 2018. In the past couple of years, he's turned them into a consistent threat in the Pac-12. He's also 1-1 in bowl games, perfectly even. And as for awards and championships, he's a co-Pac-12 Coach of the Year in 2022. He split that title with Kalen DeBoer at Washington in that year. And for recruiting, at Oregon State, he averaged the 64th ranked high school class with the 52nd ranked transfer class. Doesn't sound that good, but Oregon State is a very hard school to recruit to. considering Big Brother Oregon is in the same conference and in the same state as Oregon State, obviously. But over his years at Oregon State, that did improve. It started off a lot worse. And in his final few years, he's able to scrounge together a few decent recruiting classes. And at Michigan State, in his first offseason there, he's had the 42nd ranked high school class and the 11th ranked transfer class. Now, you might be wondering how, and with that, Jonathan Smith is going to be our first good tier head coach. Now, you might be wondering why Jonathan Smith gets the good tier and Jedd Fisch gets the average tier. They are very similar, have very similar records in their careers, very similar in recruiting. But what does it for me is Jonathan Smith has been able to do it for a little bit longer. He was able to keep Oregon State consistently above average, which I think is what Michigan State needs right now. Post Mike D'Antonio, they just haven't been able to get it together. And that consistency, I think, is very crucial for Michigan State. And that, in my opinion, is why Jonathan Smith is just one tier above Jedd Fisch. Two great coaches with a lot of potential, but one, in my opinion, has just done more to this point. And up next, we have an OG of college football. It's Kirk Ferentz of Iowa. Now, he started his head coaching career in 1999 at Iowa, and he stayed there till now. He's going into his 25th season at Iowa, and he has been the epitome of consistency there. His overall record is 196 and 119 with a 122 and 86 conference record. And he's even in bowl games 10-10. 20 bowl games is just crazy. As for awards and championships, he's a two-time Big Ten champion in 2002 and 2004, a one-time AP Coach of the Year in 2002, and a four-time Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2002, 2004, 2009, and 2015. Now, for recruiting, Iowa has averaged the 42nd ranked high school class with the 76th ranked transfer class in Ferentz's time there. And I could see the argument as a great head coach. He's been very consistent, been able to win 10 plus games with Iowa. But for the sake of consistency, I'm putting Ferentz in the good tier, just a step below guys like Lanning and Franklin. Ferentz is not known for his recruiting. He is a very good developmental guy. He's got a lot of guys in the draft on the offensive and defensive lines. But in terms of recent success, which is going to be the most crucial stat in this series, he's been able to put up some great seasons with Iowa, but they've always been just a tier below the Penn States, Ohio States, Michigans of the world. They've always been good enough to win the West, and now that there's no West, we will have to wait and see how he adjusts. But overall, for the amount of time he's spent there, he's been able to turn them into a consistent winner, which is what solidifies him as a good head coach. Now, again, you could make a case for him being like a tweener guy in between good and great, but I don't want to add any more tiers because then it would just get obscene and everybody would have their own tier pretty much. Up next, we have University of Southern California head coach Lincoln Riley. And yes, I did use USC's full government name. He started his career in 2017 at Oklahoma, where he stayed until 2021, and he was hired at USC in 2022, where he is now. Overall, he's gone 74-18, great overall record. At Oklahoma, he went 55-10 with a 37-7 conference record, just pure dominance there at Oklahoma. And at USC, he struggled a bit. They've gone 19-8 in his first couple years with a 13-5 conference record. Last year was especially difficult for them. They did not have the season anybody was predicting, myself included. And he's gone 2-4 in bowl games, including a few playoff appearances. As for awards and championships, he's been a four-time Big 12 champion every year from 2017 to 2020. And he was a one-time Big 12 Coach of the Year in 2018. Realistically, could have won Coach of the Year in any of those years, but I digress. At Oklahoma, he was able to average the 9th ranked high school class with the 4th ranked transfer class. And at USC, I was actually surprised to see this. He's averaged the 32nd ranked high school class with the 8th ranked transfer class. Now, those numbers do seem low, but USC hasn't been really focused on high school recruiting in these past couple years. They've been very heavily in the portal to kind of get their guys in and solidify it before they start bringing in new talent, especially this past recruiting cycle. Now, this may be controversial, but Lincoln Riley is going to be our first elite tier head coach. He's proven he can make the playoff. At Oklahoma, he had a lot of great years there. Now, defense has always been a struggle for Lincoln Riley, but he's been able to succeed despite that. And with a bunch of new defensive hires at USC, they should be able to adjust. Hopefully, I mean, it's hard to get much worse than they were last year defensively. But yeah, any head coach with 4 conference titles, a coach of the year, and is consistently great in recruiting, along with a 74-18 overall record. I feel like that is an easy elite tier guy, so that is where we have him. Up next, we have Luke Fickell of Wisconsin. Now, in his career, he started as the interim head coach at Ohio State in 2011. He spent that one full season there. It wasn't great. Then in 2017, he moved to Cincinnati, where he remained up until 2022, and he was hired at Wisconsin last year, where he, of course, is now. Overall, he's gone 71-31 in his career. At Ohio State, went 6-7, not a great year there. 3-5 overall in the conference. At Cincinnati, he went 57-18, 35-11, really separated Cincinnati into that elite American Conference team. They were really running that conference in the late 2010s. And at Wisconsin, he's gone 8-6. He actually does get credited with the bowl game 2 years ago. Last year, they went 7-6, add on that bowl game the year prior. And that's an 8-6 record at Wisconsin with a 5-4 conference record. In bowl games, he's gone 3-4. And for awards and championships, they were an American champ 2 times in 2020 and 2021. And he's a 3-time American Coach of the Year in 2018, 2020, and 2021. Now, for recruiting at Cincinnati, he averaged a 52nd ranked high school class with the 45th ranked transfer class. Now, it is really, really hard to recruit to those group of 5 schools, especially a school like Cincinnati. But he was able to almost average a top 50 high school class there, and he did average a top 50 transfer class, which is really impressive for an American team standards. Now, at Wisconsin, in the past couple years, he's averaged the 40th ranked high school class with the 26th ranked transfer class. For Wisconsin standards, that's not great, but he gets the benefit of the doubt just because he has only been there a year. And with that, I think Luke Fickell is our 3rd good tier head coach. He's experienced a lot of success at the group of 5 level, not as much at the power 5, so we'll have to wait and see how he adjusts. I could say it for a lot of these head coaches, but I think he has a ton of potential. Even though he didn't have a great year at Wisconsin last year, he really needed that kind of ugly season to kind of readjust to what he wants. And I think with a guy like Tyler Van Dyke, they can do that this year even. But up next, we have Nebraska head coach Matt Rhule. He started off his head coaching career at Temple in 2013, where he was until 2016. He then moved to Baylor in 2017, where he was until 2019. Moved up to the NFL, won't talk about that. Not a very successful stint there. And then in 2023 was hired at Nebraska, where he is now. Now his overall record is 52-50. At Temple, he went 28-23 with a 19-13 conference record. At Baylor, he went 19-20 with a 13-14 record. And at Nebraska last year, he went 5-7 with a 3-6 conference record. And in bowl games, he's gone 1-3. Now, Rhule is a very interesting case because on paper, those numbers look very average. But when you consider all of the circumstances of those former teams and the current team he's at, it makes a lot of sense why those numbers are deceptively average. Temple was a very, very just straight up garbage football program up until Rhule got there. And it took him a couple years, but he was able to turn Temple into a conference champion. And the same thing with Baylor. Baylor was on the verge of kind of death penalty status when Matt Rhule took over and then turned them into a Big 12 champion caliber team. And it's a case of if he stayed at Temple for 6 or 7 years instead of just 4, and if he stayed at Baylor for 5 or 6 years instead of just 3, his numbers would be a lot better. They really get bogged down by those beginning couple years where they did lose probably double-digit games at Temple and Baylor. Didn't have the greatest season at Nebraska last year. But Nebraska is another team like Temple and Baylor where they're just in the depths of their conference right now and are in desperate need of a rebuild, which Matt Rhule is primed to do there. As for awards and champions, he is a 1-time American champion in 2016 at Temple and is a 1-time Big 12 Coach of the Year in 2019. Now for recruiting, he averaged the 71st ranked high school class at Temple, which is nothing to sneeze at, like I said, for an American Conference team. At Baylor, he averaged the 35th ranked high school class. And at Nebraska, he's averaged the 22nd ranked high school class with the 45th ranked transfer class. Now that's pretty good for all of those teams' standards. He's been an above average recruiter at those places. And with all the context in mind, I mean, it's very easy for me to say he's a good tier head coach. Could be potentially a great tier head coach if he can turn Nebraska around like he did at Temple and Baylor. But of course, that is in the future. We will have to wait and see there. And after Matt Rhule, we have Maryland head coach Mike Locksley. Now, in Locksley's career, he started off at New Mexico in 2009, where he stayed until 2011. He served as the Maryland interim head coach in 2015, which not a lot of people remember. And he was hired full-time by Maryland in 2019, where he is now. Now, overall, he's gone 31-59. Not great by any metric. At New Mexico, he went 2-26 with a 2-15 conference record. I will just leave that as it is. And at Maryland, he's gone 29-33 with a 15-34 conference record. Now, despite that, he's gone perfect in bowl games, 3-0. As for awards and championships, Locksley has none. And for recruiting, he averaged the 97th ranked high school class at New Mexico, and he's averaged the 34th ranked high school class, the 62nd ranked transfer class at Maryland. Now, kind of like Greg Schiano, this is Maryland we're talking about. Maryland doesn't have a lot of historic success to kind of compare to Locksley's era there. I believe that's why he's been able to stay there as long as he has, because they haven't been awful the past couple years. I believe they won 8 games the past 2 years, which is nothing to sneeze at. But when you take everything else into account, he was just poor at New Mexico. While it is New Mexico, I mean, 2-26 is just not good. And at Maryland, he's been a below average guy in the conference, apart from last year where I think they were 4th in the East. Now, I kind of want to give Locksley the benefit of the doubt because they haven't been bad the past couple years, but overall, they just haven't been good either. His recruiting numbers are decent for Maryland standards. 34th ranked high school class is, I think, average for about where they are, maybe a little bit above average. But in terms of complete success, recently, I mean, you can make the case for him being an average guy, but he's really only had 2 decent years there at Maryland. So for that, I think he's going to be our 3rd poor head coach. That's another difficult one. I could see a tweener space between average and poor for a guy like Locksley, and he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt of being early on in their careers like some of these guys. So for that, I'm going to have to say Locksley is the 3rd poor Big Ten head coach. Up next, we have Minnesota head coach PJ Fleck. He started his career at Western Michigan in 2013, where he was until 2016, and then he was hired at Minnesota in 2017, where he is now. Overall, he's gone 80-56. At Western Michigan, he went 30-22 with a 21-11 conference record. Very good conference record there. Minnesota, he's gone 50-34 with a 29-32 conference record. Not as good, but in bowl games, he's gone 6-2. Very, very decent. For awards and championships, he is a 1-time MAC champion in 2016, 2-time MAC Coach of the Year in 2014 and 2016, and a 1-time Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2019. I believe they won 11 games that year. Very good for Minnesota standards. Minnesota is not really known for being that great of a football program, and Fleck has been able to keep them in that top tier of the West range. Now, for recruiting, at Western Michigan, he averaged the 81st ranked high school class, and at Minnesota, he's averaged the 44th ranked high school class and the 44th ranked transfer class. Now, this is another interesting case, in my opinion. At Minnesota, he hasn't been that impressive from a record standpoint, but if you think about where Minnesota was before Fleck, it's impressive that he has been able to reach the heights that he has at Minnesota, like winning the Big Ten West, I believe, in that 2019 year. Consistently being a 7+ win team. They've had bad years, obviously, but at their heights, they've been a 7, 8, 9, 10 win football team. Now, you can argue that's the Big Ten West playing into that record a lot. But regardless, before that, Minnesota was just not a good football program, and Fleck has been able to change that. So for that, I think Fleck is our 5th good head coach in the Big Ten. Next, we have Ohio State head coach Ryan Day. Now, Ryan Day was tasked of following up the legendary career of Urban Meyer at Ohio State when he was hired in 2018, where he's been now. He actually served as the interim for 3 games in 2018. He was actually fully hired in 2019. And overall, he's gone 56-8 with a 40-3 conference record, 2-4 in bowl games, which doesn't look that impressive, but when you consider most of his bowl games have been playoff games, it makes a lot more sense. For awards and championships, he's a 2-time Big Ten champion in 2019 and 2020, and a 1-time Big Ten Coach of the Year in 2019. And at Ohio State, he's averaged the 5th ranked high school class with the 41st ranked transfer class. Now, you might argue the fact that Michigan has beat them 3 years in a row, he doesn't deserve an elite tier. I have to full on disagree with you there. I feel like Ryan Day is easily an elite head coach. I mean, the record speaks for itself. The recruiting is amazing. and he's already won Big Ten championships. You can say he was born on third base. You can say pretty much anything you want about Ryan Day, but you can't say that he's not succeeded at Ohio State. And for that, he is our second elite head coach. Up next, we have Purdue head coach Ryan Walters. Now, he was hired last year at Purdue. They went 4-8 with a 3-6 conference record last year. Not really what you want to see, but I mean, Purdue's also not a great football program. In his 1 year, he did not make a bowl game, so he has a 0-0, 0-0, if you will, bowl game record. No awards or championships, and he's averaged the 49th ranked high school class with the 32nd ranked transfer class. Now, I will give him the benefit of the doubt. Those, I think, are hot seat caliber numbers, but considering he's only been there for a year and his system is probably going to take a while to set in completely at Purdue, I will have him as our fourth poor head coach. I don't think his last year was catastrophic enough to consider him a hot seat candidate already, but it wasn't good. And if they followed up with another bad year like the one they had last year, I could easily see him as a hot seat candidate next year, even though it'd only be his second year. I mean, Purdue was flat out bad last year. But Walters gets the benefit of the doubt here, and he's our fourth poor head coach. Now last, to kind of end it a bit anticlimactically, we have Sherrone Moore of Michigan. Now, of course, Sherrone Moore follows up Jim Harbaugh, the national championship winning head coach for Michigan last year. Now, technically, Sherrone Moore has a 1-0 overall record. He is credited with the win over Bowling Green. I found that surprising. I figured he would get credited with the last 3 wins of the season also, but Jim Harbaugh actually gets credited with those, even though he was suspended. For awards or championships, he, of course, has none as a head coach because he was not the head coach of the team when they won the national championship, but he was on the staff, so you could argue that. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. He's just not been a head coach for that long. And for recruiting, in his first offseason, he's had the 16th ranked high school class with the 54th ranked transfer class. And for that, he is our second brand new head coach, and he is our last head coach of the tier list. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Let us know what conference we should do next. And let us know if you disagree with any of these picks. Drop a comment saying, you know what, I think Bret Bielema is a great head coach. I think Ryan Day is a hot seat head coach. Whatever your wildest dreams can conjure up. And be sure to tune in next Monday for the 6th episode of the O&O Show. It is gearing up to be jam-packed, so get those post notifications turned on for that. And thank you for watching this video. We will see you next week.